First, start with a very quick introduction about Laurie, and I'm sure she will talk more about her experiences and her background as we go through our fireside chat today. But Laurie is a former chief of staff, as I'm sure many of you know, and is the author of the book Who Has Your Back? A Leader's Guide to Getting the Support You Need from the Chief of Staff You Deserve. Laurie and I were just talking before this call, and even 5 years ago, there were maybe I don't know, a handful, if that, number of books, definitely single digit number of books when it came to the chief of staff role. And so it's so exciting to see more and more people recognize the importance of the role, the efficacy of this role, how important it is for leaders and executives to have a chief of staff by their side. And so having these books, I can slowly grow my collection of chief of staff related titles. And so I'm so excited for that. So everyone, please join me in giving a huge round of applause for Laurie for joining us today. Thank you for being here and taking time out of your busy schedule to share your insights about the Chief of Staff role and to tell us a little bit more about your book.
Thank you, Clara. Appreciate that. And hey, everybody, it's so nice to be with you. These are my favorite types of calls where I get to be with stellar chiefs of staff talking about what's important, why we do what we do, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun together. Clara, do you want me to just jump right in, or is there?
Yes, why don't you give us the elevator pitch on yourself, if you will, the summary of your background. Would love to talk a little bit about your experiences.
You bet, you bet. And then of course, whatever's most important to our listeners, I want this to feel engaging and interactive. But as Clara said, I'm Laurie Arron. I spent about 30 years all in at AT&T. I grew up as a sales leader and had the great honor of becoming a executive coach and chief of staff to senior executives within the firm. I had the honor of chiefing for 3 different leaders. One of them was our CEO at the time of all of our consumer business, which was an extraordinary role. And when he retired, I chiefed for his 2 successors. And they were really 3 distinctly different types of leaders, which gave me so much more experience and range in my chiefhood. And it is by far the best job I've ever had. So I say that to meet you where you are. I truly think you have an amazing role, whether you're serving as a chief now or whether you aspire to be a chief of staff. It is the best seat in the house, frankly. I think it's the best seat in the house. So now I show up in the world, having retired from AT&T. I'm now an executive coach to C-suite leaders and chiefs of staff. It's all I do every day long, and I absolutely love it. I would do it for free. I have taken all of my experience from AT&T, which was vast, saw lots of different corners of business, and my coaching experience. I'm a pretty deeply certified executive coach, and I bring all of that to my clients. It's a little bit of truth telling, a little bit of advice, a little bit of counsel. I sort of bring it all to the table to serve clients. And I had, as Clara said, I wrote the book, Who Has Your Back? It published it in 4th quarter, and I was so honored to see that it had done really well in its category and is now a bestseller in its category. So I'm here to say hi. I would love to share with you some of the things that I really found important as the chief, mistakes I made and things I learned from it. And of course, be here for you to ask questions and see if there's anything that I can share that brings value to you specifically with something that you might be dealing with today. So that is what we will do. Before we get started, I'm just going to ask, we have a small enough group here that I think we can do this really well. I'll ask everybody to come off mute. Everybody come off mute and share with me, popcorn style, one word that describes how your experience chiefing today. So it can be anything from, joy, curiosity, impact, whatever. One word that describes your experience as a chief today. Jump on in.
Change.
Got it.
Fast.
Great.
I'd say fast-paced.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'd say feedback.
Okay, great.
Gravitas.
Gravitas, beautiful.
I would say grow, innovation and grow.
Okay, super.
I
Rewarding.
would say
For sure. For sure. Rewarding.
curiosity.
Yep. Yep. Anyone else? Okay, good. Well, I like to hear that just to get a sense of who's in the room and how you're experiencing the role. Almost every single word you used was very positive in nature. So I get a sense that this is a strong group that likes doing the chief role, which is fantastic. Let's see. I think that it would probably be best to have me pause at the very beginning and ask you, what would you like to get out of this call? And I can cater what we talk about to meet your needs. Like, just by show of hands, anything in particular you'd like to get out of this call? How can I be most supportive to you? Don't be shy.
Hey, Laurie. I'm also a chief of staff turned executive coach. So just from a selfish perspective, interested in your experience building your business. And nice to meet you. And thanks so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. Great. I've just taken a note there. Anyone else? Anything you might be struggling with or facing that you want to talk about here? We can go anywhere you want.
I'm going to pop in for some of our aspiring chiefs of staff. Laurie, you said that you started at AT&T and you grew your career there. I would love to talk about how you made the transition from, I think you mentioned sales before, into chief of staffdom.
You got it, for sure. Lee, I think I heard you come off mute there for a moment.
Yeah, sorry, Claire and I jumped at the same time. So I've got an enterprise background coming from American Express, and I now counsel a broad range of clients, but that includes a lot of early stage companies. And my challenge is translating the insight from the enterprise context into the startup or small business context where it does matter, but the jargon and the situations and circumstances to which they apply are different.
Yeah, that's a beautiful topic. You got it. Anyone else before I jump in?
I'd like
I'd
to
say-
echo that in just a little. Oh, sorry, go, Amita. Go.
Yeah, please.
Oh, okay, thanks, Angie. I was going to say, I did my intro on Ask Chief of Staff Community, and I put that one of my weaknesses is being able to say no. And sometimes it just means having stronger boundaries, but then I don't want to come across as just like saying no. So I'm just like, okay, cool, I'll take it on. And I'm good at asking about, oh, when do you want it for? And then I make time for it. But then what I should do is to probably be like, actually, maybe that'll be better, or that sits better with someone else. And then not overstep for someone to think I'm doing their job. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so yeah, great. I got it all. So let's play with that a little bit today. So as we get started, I'll hit all of these and then we'll just see where the conversation goes. What I want to say, first of all, is the book that I wrote is the book that I wish I had when I was a chief. As Clara said at the very beginning of the call, there really isn't a lot of content out there that is immersive on this beautiful position. There's some academic books, here's where the role came from. It started back in the military, some educational type books. But I don't see a lot out there, or haven't seen a lot out there, that actually tells you what the job looks like and feels like. And my goodness, the impact it can have on the leader and on the chief, and frankly, on the company mission. So that is what drove me writing this book. I never aspired to be an author. I had clients say, you need to bottle this up and share this with the world. So in short order, I did just that. I wrote this book for the leader to help them understand the chief role, because it's a very confusing role. It's a misunderstood role. There isn't a cookie cutter chief of staff out there. So I wanted to demystify the role and then help leaders understand how to use or utilize a chief of staff, how to hire one, how to hit the ground running. So that is what this book is about. The second one that's coming out at the end of Q1 is for you. It's for chiefs of staff. And it is designed to help you really hit the ground running and nail your first 90 days as a chief of staff. So I think it's important to just orient, like, why did I put this stuff out there? Because as Clara said, there's just not a lot of good books out there that are go-tos. So for the first question, oh, pardon me.
Laurie, so
Yeah.
sorry. I think Angie had a question that she wanted to add. Angie, do you have a chance? I know that you and Amita spoke up at the same time there at the
Let's
end.
do it. Let's do it.
Yes, thanks, Claire. I appreciate it. So it was along the lines of what Lee had said. So I come from the world of startups, and I would like to learn how to go from startups with our hair on fire to implementing more of that reporting and routine that the more corporate world has and can utilize, but implement that at the startup phase and obviously flexing, but give more structure. That's
Yep. And that's what we do, right? As chiefs, we bring discipline and structure. And I love the word hygiene to organizations. We take, chaos and we turn it into order so that the most productive operation can roll. So thank you, Angie. I'll make sure we cover that. So let's, the first things first, I think it was was it Tammy about the coach to chief of staff. As I said, I grew up at AT&T as a sales leader, and I fell into AT&T. I had not pursued that. It was my first role right out of college, and I just happened to be pretty decent at sales. And the company was very kind to me and gave me lots of opportunity at a leadership level at a pretty young age. So I had moved to 6 different cities with AT&T and had wonderful leaders and challenging leaders, and gosh, made lots of mistakes and learned lots of lessons. But I had at some point, about 17 of my years at AT&T were in sales. And at some point, I just wasn't learning anymore. So I chose to become an executive coach. And I paid for that on my own at the time. I really wanted to bring more to AT&T through the lenses of a coach. So I went through all the training, all the certifications, and got the digits, if you will. And I was at that time trying to reinvent myself at AT&T and become an internal executive coach to leaders. I knew that I had that in me, and I loved being a sales leader and coaching sales teams. So it just made a lot of sense. Right when that happened, and I was in the process of reinventing myself, the the chief of staff role became available for one of our CEOs. And I remember the HR partner calling me saying, why don't you just interview for that too? Put your name in that hat in case they weren't able to reinvent a role for you. And so I did. And coincidentally and luckily, I got that role, which was wonderful. And I chiefed for almost 5 years for all 3 of those leaders. But the beauty of it was that I was able to express myself in the chief role through the lenses of a coach. So I was able to see the business in more of the coaching way. And I have been given a really nice platform to coach and work with a lot of the officers that I was supporting. So I think, what I hope is that each of you who are in the chief role now, you're finding your comfort zone on how you express yourself in the role, whether it's a financial guru, or maybe you're more of an event planner, or maybe you're more of a truth teller and an HR talent developer. I was a coach. I still am a coach. And I had enough permission from the leaders that I had the opportunity to support. They said, do what you do best and go ahead and chief that way. So that's how I really moved into full-on chief of staffing and really coaching, so much so that when I was able to retire from AT&T, I say rewire, I fully launched my coaching business. And now I get to serve corporates and startups as a coach to leaders and chiefs. And I really do consider that an honor. So I think hopefully that answers your question. I think most of the chiefs that I see and engage with have a little bit of coach in them. I really believe it. Some tap into it and use it, and some may not. It really depends on the leader that you support. But if there's anything I can suggest to you as we get to know each other on this call, bring it all to your leader. Say what needs to be said. You are able to see that business and the range across the business in ways no other position does. So I would invite you to not hold back and see, you know, where is the coach in you and who could benefit from that type of advice and counsel that you might bring to the table. Any questions or comments on that? I see some nods, so I'm hoping I see some other coaches.
And have you had issues where we just talked about coaching up,
Yeah.
and that's a recent topic. Can you say more about coaching up?
Yeah, I think I like to call it designing the alliance. When you begin your chiefhood for your leader and all the leaders that he or she has on the leadership team, I think it's about developing a relationship first, really establishing trust and getting to know people properly versus just wearing the hat of the chief. So once you develop trust and once the leadership team truly understands that you are there to serve, and not in a subservient way, but you're there to serve the mission, you're there to serve the leaders, that it allows you permission to bring all of yourself to the role. And you know, you use the words manage up. I think about it a little bit less like that. It's not about levels, but it's about impact. What needs to be said here? If I can create the right language or create the right space to say what I believe needs to be said in order to activate or ignite the most productive dialogue possible. And I truly think that that's what leaders are looking for anyway. And I would say to all of you as chiefs, who are you to hold back? I mean, there's no reason for us to hold back if there's something valuable, a perspective that we own to say, but whether it's up or out. So I say, do it with trust, do it with some compassion, use your words properly, you know, formulate the right language and speak to leaders in the way that leaders are used to being spoken to, meaning just net it out, you know, just net it out. They don't need a lot of detail. Here's the point, little bit of context, here's the decision. So I hopefully that helps, Angie. Bring it all to your leaders. Yeah, thumbs up. Good. So I talked about how I became a coach and transitioning from sales to the chief role, which I kind of hit on a little bit. Let's talk about you know, a couple of you mentioned that you're either in the enterprise space or you're in the small business space, and how do you really bridge those different environments as a chief? And I would say carefully, very carefully. In my experience, the knowledge I've gained is that no matter how big the company is or what is going on in the company, the issues are the same. Whether somebody's overhauling a leadership team or whether there is a lack of alignment on the leadership team around the company mission or some of the top initiatives, that can exist in a big company. It can absolutely exist in a small company. And I believe that as chiefs, we have the ability to see, almost smell out what's out there before it becomes a problem. So I would take the focus off of the size of the business and simply look at where are the kinks in our way of delivering on this initiative or delivering on this mission. And I would focus on ironing out those kinks. A lot of the chiefs that I get to work with are fantastic problem solvers. They just love a juicy problem. Probably all of you can relate to that. I would push you to think about yourself as a problem averter. Where are you looking down the pipe of the business to foresee where something might turn into a problem? And how are you making sure it never, ever hits the bottom line, that it doesn't become a problem that now somebody needs to solve? How are you using your time to be an averter, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful attribute that chiefs bring to the table. I see some people nodding, so I take it you see the value in that. You know, I think a lot of organizations rely on chiefs to bring that discipline and structure and order to your leadership team. And I, again, think that that exists both in macro enterprise companies as well as with smaller companies. The biggest difference I've seen, and I think it's a benefit to the chiefs, is that in the bigger enterprises, I find that decision making takes longer. There's more stakeholdering that has to take place, getting everybody aligned around something before a decision can be made or funding can be offered. Whereas in some of the smaller companies, there's just fewer people at the table, fewer committees and bureaucracy, and they can take action quickly. But the work the chief does to gather the facts, put the options together, give people the opportunity to make decisions, that work is the same. So my invitation to you is think about the enterprise or the smaller startups being actually very similar in nature. There may be fewer people around the table, but the work is not entirely different. Let me pause right there and see if that resonates with you or if that doesn't resonate with you. Let me know your thoughts and if that hit the mark.
I think it hit the mark, but also from my experience of growth stage startups at all, levels, that earlier stage where they're still fleshing out roles, generalized to specialized, and then that next portion of, okay, well, how do we go about, building org structure and reporting and going from flat to hierarchy, right? And then how do we establish routines and decision-making processes? Those things might already be in place in a larger org, and in a startup, how do you even get those things started and implemented?
Yeah, it's a great question. Last week I was in Austin working with a company, and they're actually more of a startup organization within a larger company. And they asked me to do exactly what you laid out. How do we bring some structure, org cadence, and governance around what we're taking on? And I started by asking questions, not providing answers. I asked, what would it take for this leadership team? What would it take for this leadership team to have the right meetings, the right discussions with the right people every single week in order to effectively run the business? What do you need visibility to in order to run a fantastic operation that is super effective? So I started with a question. And sometimes, I think more often than not, Angie, when we start with questions, the answers become clear. So we actually left that workshop with a clear org cadence. So now all the leaders know, who are we meeting with, at how often, what are we talking about? It was super orderly, if you will. What other meetings are we having now that are going to go away because they're a waste of time? How are we going to make decisions? Who needs to have the D? Who's going to be an influencer to the decision? And who just needs to be informed? So we decided last week to just use a RACI methodology, which is quite common. It's not the only methodology out there, but to have a decision-making methodology in order for the company to move in a fluid way through critical decisions. The other item that I think is important as you're getting started with, chiefing for a startup is, how are we going to handle escalations? When what hits the fan, how do we work through crisis management in a methodical, productive, effective way? And that was a really meaningful conversation. I helped them move through that with simplicity, because I think as humans, we have a tendency to make the simple things really complex, and they're really not that complex. So when you drill into, what needs to happen, what really needs to happen, by when, and who needs to make the decision, you can work through escalation paths fairly quickly. And then I think another element of chiefing in that world is developing a communication plan and timeline. How often are we talking to our people? How often are we talking internally and externally? Are the key messages in sync? Are they aligned? So when the leader is up doing a keynote, is he or she talking about the same things as we're talking about with our people in our town halls, et cetera? What I'm sharing with you are just some of the key pillars of what I think is important when we're beginning to be, when we're beginning our chiefhood. How do you get that org running, right? How do you get it running tight so that you can really drive the mission and handle things that come at you sometimes from surprise? Someone once told me this, and I think it's a beautiful orientation to the chief role. I'll share it with you. It's in the book that's coming out, but I'll share it with you here so that you can see if it resonates with you. The data says that most chiefs, on average, are in the role for about 18 months. And in that 18 months, it's broken into 3 6-month segments. The first 6 months, the chief is learning the business. You're learning your leader. You're learning how things run, what policies are there, who are my resources, literally observing how do things work here. And by goodness, you're making sure that nothing breaks or falls through the cracks. So in essence, the first 6 months is very much an intake mode. The second 6 months, you know the job, you know the people, and you're getting a really good sense of what works, but you're actually putting your stamp on the chief of staff office in that second 6 months. You are killing processes that don't work. You are building ones that are begging for a process. You are putting people in the right roles or changing the way they do things so that things are refined and working seamlessly. You're making decisions. You're literally putting your stamp on the work so that one day when you leave, it's better because you were there. And the third 6 months, you are really thinking for and thinking with your leader in a way that allows you to be their proxy, their delegate. They can't go to meetings, but they trust you so much and you know the agenda so much that you go to that meeting and you are representing your leader. And that's the natural evolution of a chief of staff role. You grow and evolve into that seat. And hopefully when you do that, and that takes about 18 months, you are ready for some other strong, probably rich operational role within the business after delivering on your chief responsibilities. I see many chiefs go on and run a line of business. I've seen some chiefs become COO. I've seen many chiefs move into a strategy role because your skill set as a chief is pulled in that direction oftentimes. So I share that with you. So if you're at the beginning of your journey or you're in the middle of your journey, what the data shows us is that that's a general evolution of the role, whether you're in enterprise or in a smaller operation. Angie, did that help you a little bit with, how do I start structuring things for the smaller startup operation?
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like you're part business manager and part therapist with the understanding, but also digging and asking questions like why?
Yeah. Why? And the other thing, and I learned this the hard way when I was chiefing for my first leader, that resilience is a really big attribute that is important in the chief role because things move so quickly. I think somebody said, maybe it was Brittany, things are really fast paced as a chief. I know that. I mean, been there, done that, bought a t-shirt. I get how fast it can go. And look, some things fall through the cracks and some things can go awry. And what I learned the hard way is that resilience as a chief is so important, that when things fall through the cracks, and they will, I promise, to get back on that horse, get back up on the race, and go is so important because when we slow down, things break. When we slow down, initiative dates are in jeopardy. When we slow down, everything else, the engine does not hum like it does when we are rolling. So I say, look back to learn, and absolutely look back to learn, but don't stay there. Don't stay there longer than you need to. You have to move forward. And so they say, turn the page. That is something that was challenging for me to learn. But once I did learn that and really mastered it, frankly, it changed everything in the way that I chiefed. And then it had a ripple effect on others around me. When they saw that I didn't skip a beat, I learned and I moved on. It enabled the rest of the leadership team around me to do the same thing. So I'll share that with you as a little bit of a golden nugget in the role that you have. What else is on your mind? Anybody looking for, their next role? Oftentimes I talk to chiefs of staff about, where do I go next? What do I do next? What does succession look like? Does that resonate with anybody here by show of hands? Anybody looking for their Tammy? Okay, great. Well, I'll share with you what I've learned in my experience. The chief role is a cycled role, right? You have the role, maybe it's 18 months, and you're doing the same things in cycles. And hopefully if you're doing it well, I think you're building playbooks for somebody else to use when you leave the role. And I really do believe that should be a focus for chiefs. Like, take note of what you're doing so that the person who comes in afterward doesn't have to figure it out. Build the playbook for them on how to run a board meeting, how to establish a town hall, how to write the keynote for your leader. Everything has a playbook. So I think succession planning is very, very important. And the way that I've seen it work well is when it's completely invisible to the leader that you serve. Meaning, when you're ready for your next gig, my hope is that you have taken the time to really ascertain, what does the chief of staff office need now that it didn't need when I started chiefing? Maybe you brought in process, or you brought in organization, but maybe that's not what the office needs now because you have built that and it's running. Maybe it needs more thought provocation. Maybe your leader needs more challenge. Maybe whatever, fill in the blank. The point is, take the time to ascertain, what does this office need now? And that you start thinking about the talent that's in the organization around you, and start thinking about who could take this role and do an extraordinary job. And when you identify that person, that you start to expose them to the work, to the opportunity to be leading the chief office. And when the time is right, and if they are the right fit, that it is absolutely invisible to your leader. So that when you move out or over and the new person moves in, nothing short of a 30-day shadowing period, they are off and running. And that level of support, or the comfort of support, is completely invisible through your leader's lenses. So I believe succession planning should start at about a year in. You should be thinking about your replacement for your leader. And I also think you want to tap into, what did I really enjoy about this role? What did I get exposed to that just lit me up and my soul was on fire? For me, I love a good, rich operational role. I knew that was the direction I wanted to head. I knew that coaching lit me up. So I was very clear on my next role, but yours is maybe very different. Maybe you loved the financial part of becoming a chief, and looking at data and understanding what a P&L looks like and what actions does it indicate we should go take. Whatever it may be, tap into where your joy was and pursue roles that are in alignment with that. Where there's joy and strength, there's great fulfillment. And I think if you don't do that, believe me, the company will probably have lots of seats for you to sit in. But when we don't have our hand in the choices presented to us, sometimes we'll just take what's coming. So I think being very intentional about where was your joy in what you were exposed to is a really important step. Let me pause right there and see where your heads are at. What's going on for you? Amita, you're nodding. Is this resonating with you?
Yeah, I think it's so important to tap into what brings you joy. So I was just smiling because I was like in real agreement with that.
Yeah.
And it makes the job easier then when you can kind of like do more of that as well.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. What else? I will say another, I ended up building a course. It's called Chief Space Boardroom, where I take chiefs, a small group, it's a sort of an intimate group about this size. I take them through a year of, it's a bit of a coaching and a mastermind where we literally work through the issues and opportunities facing chiefs right then and there. So whether there's an ability to go deep on how to make critical decisions with my leader, or how to drive, a really open culture around feedback. Time management is a big topic for a lot of chiefs. Problem solving, as I mentioned earlier on the call. Chief Space Boardroom does allow chiefs to have that kind of support in a coaching bubble, if you will, so that they can really reach their fullest expression as chiefs. And I built this because CEOs and people that I was serving, they didn't know how to really train their chiefs. So I created this to serve that need. And I'm delighted. This is my 3rd year now running Chief Space Boardroom. So I want to position that with all of you, if that's something that would be helpful to any of you. We haven't even started enrolling yet. It starts in February, but there is help out there. I promise.
I'm going to drop Laurie's services link here in the chat so that you can check that out if that's something that you're interested in exploring. Obviously, many of you benefit from being in this community and this sort of mastermind space, so definitely worth checking out. Laurie, one of the things that I wanted to touch on, and you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but this sense of loneliness at the top, it's definitely, I agree with you, being a chief of staff is the best seat in the house. I always credit my chief of staff tenure as the thing that really changed my career, and it took it in a direction that I never could have foreseen coming. And had I not done that, I would not be doing what I do now. But it can be very lonely when you're in this very interesting hierarchical position where sometimes you are regarded as part of the C-suite, but you don't necessarily have that same C-suite title, but you are definitely not the same as, let's say, a department head or a director of a certain business function. So can you talk a little bit about that and, maybe ways to either combat it or how you dealt with it when you were in this position, not once, but 3 times?
Absolutely. I think what I learned, because there really aren't true peers as chiefs of staff, there's networks, there's beautiful organizations like this, the one that you're running, Clara, that give people that peer-like support. My program as well, Chief Space Boardroom, to become a member of or a participant in a community of chiefs, so that you have people to lean on, so that people can give you suggestions. I can guarantee you, whatever it is that you're facing, there is someone that has faced something similar before. There's ways online, you can go find out who's got the best OKRs, all of that stuff is available to you. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about literally the support in a coach-like way. Like, I'm feeling lonely. How do I get through this? Well, I believe in finding a mentor within the company or on the leadership team. There's usually somebody who has their arm around you figuratively, and they want to see you succeed. And if you establish some trust with them, create a dialogue with them, have them be your go-to person, you can feel less alone. When I chiefed at AT&T, there were, probably about 60 some odd chiefs that each, had their leader that they supported. And the chief network was very important for us to get work done. So becoming a part of that network informally and communicating with one another, leaning on one another to get things done, helps really address the loneliness we can feel. And I think at the end of the day, what I learned and reminded myself of always is that whatever answers I'm seeking, I probably had the answers inside of me, and I just did not know how to access them at the beginning. So sometimes for me, being silent and digging deep allowed me to find the answers that I was looking for externally. Who do I need to talk to? And where do I need to go jump and look for this resource? I was usually had boatloads of common sense, and I was very intuitive, and I knew what I thought the next indicated action should be. So it's not so lonely when you think about, I can count on myself, I can bet on myself. Anne Hyatt was the chief of staff to Jeff Bezos and Eric Schmidt. She wrote an amazing book called Bet on Yourself, which is fantastic. Some of you are nodding. That's one of the other few books out there that I've really, really enjoyed. So tap into the resources around you. Don't try to work in a silo. Ask for what you need and make sure that you're part of a network in any way that serves you. And by all means, speak your truth. Ask for what you need. Yeah. Is that helpful, Claire?
Yes, thank you for that. And I'm total agreement there. I think at larger companies, larger corporations, you might have that chief of staff network within your company. I know LinkedIn, for example, is another company that has a really robust chief of staff network, and many executives have chiefs of staff. And oftentimes you are working with each other in some capacity. But for those of us who are maybe at earlier stage companies where it's just you and it very much can feel like an island of one, I think it's always important to find those external community groups and things like that. You also touched a little bit in your answer here about finding mentors. Can you talk a little bit about how to go about doing that? I know a lot of people say, yes, I would love to have a mentor. I would love to have somebody who's, looking out for me, or I have a conversation with them relatively frequently or at a scheduled cadence, but how do I go about finding a mentor that's right for me?
Yeah. And I think you just said the right words, that is right for me. So, I would recommend that you look in the right places, first of all. So I'd say within the organization is always helpful. Someone who's knows the characters, knows the people, understands how the business runs, and has that familiarity, but also somebody who's probably exemplary at what it is that they do in a way that you will need. So one of my many mentors at AT&T was our senior sales leader. He was and likely still is very much an efficiency thinker. He was very bold and very powerful in his voice, never, ever held back on ruffling feathers. In fact, he would say, when we're ruffling feathers, we are pushing the business far. If we're not ruffling feathers, we're not working hard enough. We're not saying what needs to be said. And so I took on that orientation. And it really gave me meaning. And so while I didn't knock on his door and say, will you mentor me? You better believe that he was clearly a mentor. And I watched him and I sponged up his knowledge and the way that he led. I loved how he handled problems. And he became I'd say an informal mentor to me, teaching me things I have never forgotten. So the point I'm making with all of you is that you don't necessarily need to have a catch to every pitch. You could have lots of mentors out there that may never know they're mentoring you, but you've got their eye on them in a way that really benefits what you're doing. At the same time, you can also formally ask somebody to mentor you. And I would do that in a very genuine way. Hey, I'm really working on XYZ. Maybe it's finding my voice. I'm really working on speaking my truth and expressing myself. I have felt more tentative in the past. I notice you do that really well at the senior table. I could use that kind of support. Would you consider mentoring me for the next 90 to 120 days while I really try to master that? So what would mentoring look like? Could we meet maybe once a month and you could give me some of your advice or your knowledge and watch me apply it and then give me feedback afterwards? So you put a little bit more structure around what you're asking for, but have it come from a point of a specific need. When people are mentoring, it's because they've mastered something you haven't yet. So when they know that there's something specific you're working on, they're more apt to embrace it and really invest in you that way. So that's what I would say in terms of approach to mentorship. And if you're going to look for a mentor externally, you can certainly take the same approach. Mentors come in all different shapes and sizes too. Sometimes it's a teacher at the kids' school. Sometimes it's somebody in our church. Sometimes it's someone at your company, or it could be a best friend. It can come in lots of different shapes and sizes. Good question.
Yeah, I think that's something that I myself wish I had done more of as a chief of staff was really kind of finding more of a mentor, somebody a little bit more ahead of myself in their career to kind of see what the road ahead might look like. And, hopefully for our audience here and our members in our community know that there are folks who are, Laurie mentioned this, but just because you haven't done it, most likely there's somebody who has done it and don't feel like you need to figure everything out by yourself. So really utilize those spaces. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. I, of course, could ask Laurie questions for all day if I could, but I want to make sure that anybody here who has a question, you have the opportunity to do so as well. Laurie here, wealth of knowledge. I'll drop her book link in our chat again, but feel free to use the raise hand function or just come off mute. We're a small group here, so I think we can get to everybody. Or if you can't and you're off camera and you want to drop your question in the chat, I can read it out loud to Laurie as well. So Tammy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Clara. Laurie, actually, I found your sharing best practices very insightful. And I come from a majority of my experience from enterprise. And let's say 80% of it, 20% are from startup industries. My question here is, I believe that feedback is the best way to learn in our, as a chief of staff or any professional. So my question here is, from your experience, what advice do you have for us as a chief of staff? How do we learn to do our best version and show up best version of our chief of staff in ways of who are the people that actually back you up and actually give you that feedback to do the best work of your roles, right? You know what I'm saying?
I do. My philosophy on feedback is that it's a gift, and to welcome feedback and invite feedback with open arms. One of my CEOs said something to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, look, there's really no such thing as bad feedback or constructive feedback. There's no such thing. We might get feedback that is unexpected. We might get feedback that counters what we thought we would be hearing, but it's always given because the person who's giving it to you believes in you, and they know you can do better or more or faster or whatever. So I truly believe that feedback is a gift, and I also believe in asking for it. It can look like after a meeting, let's say you're running an operations meeting or you're facilitating a project update meeting or something like that, to maybe take one of those mentors or take your leader, for example, or somebody that's a trusted partner before the meeting and say, I'm working on this thing. I'm working on how I deliver XYZ. Can you give me some feedback after the meeting? So they're going into the meeting knowing they're going to be asked for feedback afterward. I also think that feedback can be very impactful when you ask for it in advance of when you need it. So let's say I'm looking for feedback about my annual performance. I may say to one of my CEOs, look, tomorrow I'd like to dedicate our huddle to some feedback about my performance over the course of the last year. It would be so helpful if you could highlight how you see me handle conflict, and that you plant that seed with your leader 24 hours before you even want the session, so that he or she can take the time to truly process what would be best for you to hear and to process their thoughts around it, versus asking for feedback sometimes on the spot where you're going to get a limited or maybe a narrow lens. It'll probably be just as authentic and genuine, but you get more range when you plant the seed in advance of when you need it. And I think you know what those topics can be, right? Talent development, maybe compensation, but asking for feedback because you're worth it, and knowing that feedback is always given 99% of the time with a positive intent. Nobody wakes up every day and says, I'm going to go give this person some awful feedback because I just feel like being a ding dong. Or people don't do that. They provide feedback because they believe in the person and they care about doing better. I see one in the chat here. Would love to hear about some of your failures as you experience the chief of staff and how you grow. Oh gosh, so many. I'll hit one at a high level. That came from Annalyn. I'll hit it at a high level, but I think you'll get the sense of what happened. We had a very, very big call taking place where all of our VPGMs there was 20 of them from around the country, were coming on this one call to learn a very big topic. It was a 20-minute call. We had to pull them in from different parts of the country. I was facilitating this. It was a virtual video call, and my leader was at a conference. So I had to pull together him and all these 20 people and make sure that that 20 minutes was as productive as possible so that they could learn the news and have some time for Q&A. And yours truly, for whatever reason, I'm always astute with technology. I run the test on technology. I light up the technology long before the call even starts. I had my right-hand person next to me to make sure that if the call went down, like something, I had all the experts there. And wouldn't you know it, the call, we got everybody on the call, and 2 months into the call, everybody dropped. I mean, it was a colossal failure. And oh boy, I took a lot of, I'm harder on myself than anyone else will be on me. We got through it. We ended up getting a brand new bridge and got everybody on the call. It was a bit rushed, but the result was they learned the information, had some time to ask questions, and for all intents and purposes, we were done. But come on, that was a real failure, in my opinion. What I learned from that was that how you react under pressure is really important. I was heads down, working the technology, thinking, what would I do here? Crisis management, right? What would I do here if these were my children? Get another bridge, get it out. I totally tuned out everybody else in the room. And my boss knew me enough to know that I am on it, don't interrupt me. And so within, 5 or 6 minutes, we got everybody back on the call. So making sure that you perform under pressure was a lesson for me. And also, I became the chief who had a plan behind a plan behind a plan. So I took contingency planning to the nth degree. I always had experts in the room to light up technology before future calls. I always had a backup technology that I could act on in a moment if that were to happen again. So what it taught me was, how can I make sure that whatever I'm set out to do, if it fails, I've got a plan, and then I've got a plan behind that plan. And I think that they still have that philosophy there now. Like, do you have the plan behind the plan? So those are some of the things I learned. And I will tell you, I'm grateful that happened now, because it made me a better chief. It literally made me a better chief. And I think there were people in that room who were silently rooting for me to make sure I could get that call back in order, because they knew the topic was so important. So be kind to ourselves, stay focused under pressure, learn from whatever happens. What will be useful next time? How can I use this and help others around me? Because they will be in that hot seat one time too, I promise. And kind of, pay it forward. Annalyn, I hope that was helpful.
Amazing. I love what you're saying there. And I think, failure is always an opportunity. And this is a personal preference, try to stay away from the word failure and reframe as a learning opportunity, because there's just no way that we know everything. We're all humans here, and it would be absurd to think that we had all the answers without having done many parts of this job before. So we have 1 minute here. This is a meaty question from Catherine, so I don't know if we're going to have time to really dig into it, but some common pitfalls in the CEO and chief of staff relationship, and maybe some examples. And if this is a question that we punt for later, totally okay as well, but maybe we can touch on this. What are some things that you see very commonly with some of the chiefs of staff that you're working with?
The biggest is around communication and trust. When I see the relationship and the dynamic between a leader and a chief working well, it's because trust has been established, clear expectations have been established, and no one is micromanaging. So the pitfalls are when you haven't established trust and you run with something and maybe your leader is not really familiar with what you're doing. So having a conversation around clarity, what are we trying to achieve? Here's what I'm planning to go do. Do you have any feedback? is this in alignment with what you're looking for? And have that dialogue be open and often, especially if you're just getting started. And the dynamic doesn't work when the leader is micromanaging too much. So I always tell my leaders, trust and verify, set the expectation clearly, and then set them free. Let them go. Create enough touch point with yourself that you feel you have some oversight, but do not micromanage. It is it's a dead end, frankly. I think that's a great topic, Clara, for maybe another call, because it is a meaty one, but at a high level, those are my thoughts.
Amazing. Thank you. I know it's a great question, but obviously we're right here at the top of the hour. So much great information here. I'd love to have you back, Laurie, obviously, maybe to come promote your next book with us. So everyone, a huge round of applause for Laurie. Thank you so much for joining us in this hour. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? I know we shared your website earlier, but is there any other ways you'd like for us to?
Laurie at lauriearron.com. I have a pretty healthy clip for content on LinkedIn. And I also have a newsletter where I produce good content for chiefs and leaders on a monthly basis. So feel free to add yourself to that newsletter list on my website. So thank you so much for having me. And it was great to share space with all of you. I hope to see you in LinkedIn and connect with you there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurie. And we will see the rest of you in Slack in our next workshop. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.